And here we go.
Okay, welcome everyone to this Future Teacher session entitled Learning Analytics for Mere Mortals. And it's one of our reactivated sessions, more on that in a second. About the reactivated sessions, this is the last one in the sequence. And the idea is that they're more flipped, more focused on activities and more rooted in real experience with new and additional guest speakers. There's a link here on my screen to the journeys that we created. You can explore that in your own time, and there's a step-by-step guide on how to access those. So we have an announcement and a welcome to do. So as I mentioned, this is kind of officially the end of our rerunning of reactivated sessions. But the good news is that we're going to continue, at least that's the plan, and under the banner of Future Teacher Reflected. So the idea being that we've had a big and ever-growing community, more reflection, additional guest speakers, the same topics, but reflecting maturity, really, I guess. We have two new colleagues with us, Rosemary and Teresa. You can see on the screen there where they're from and their Twitter handles, and myself, Lillian and Alistair are all still here as well. It may be that some of the webinars we hand over control to our colleagues. So there's a bigger team, which means that more variety, more heads to discuss and decide on what we should cover and what we should exclude and so on. Alistair, you normally talk about your quick review. Do you want to share your screen?
Yep, I'll do that quickly now. Oh, it says I can't start. Oh, that's it. So you've stopped yours. Okay, so just a reminder that you've got a wealth of existing resources in the learning object that we're looking at. If you haven't logged into that yet, perhaps Ron, could you pop the link into the text chat for folk? We're asking you to log into it a slightly different way today, because if you log into it through the resource link that Ron's giving you, you will be able to capture your own learning analytics as we go through the resource. So there is a whole learning object behind where we are at the moment. We're on slide 31, even though we're only 2 slides in because there's the previous session. I'm just going to pick out here some of the highlights of that previous session that you might like to look at. There's an element in there where we look at different perspectives of learning analytics and how different people might use them in what sort of different ways. There's also some interesting elements where it talks about some of the kind of caveats, some of the cautionary tales of learning analytics, and that's actually picked up by some of our guest speakers. James Udale from last year did a really interesting section on misinterpreting Panopto as well as interpreting it, but just looking at how you might get completely different stories from the same data. And we also had Jess from the University of York also, and so if you have a look at those sessions, we had Deltian College using Xerti toolkits for their own learning analytics and so on. Lots of really useful stuff, including a primer on XAPI and learning analytics from Ron. So we would encourage you after the session to reflect on the strategies, the practice, the student guidance that might be needed in your institution. But just for now, just for the moment, bearing in mind the range of different things that there are, the very practical stuff about how to consider the ethics of learning analytics that we've talked about on this screen at the minute, some of the previous case studies, how to learn about XAPI. What I'd like you to do, if you're in the learning object, is go to page 32, which you'll find you can get to that quite quickly with the table of contents button down the bottom. Go to page 32, which is where I am, a moment of reflection, and we're just going to invite you to take a second or two just to say, of those different elements we looked at a minute ago, you know, the really practical classroom-based stuff, the more technical things, what would be useful to you? Now, this isn't a real reflection. This is almost a a setup. We just wanted an excuse to get you writing something in the learning object if you've got it open, so that we can then show you how all those different responses are being tracked. Okay, so if you're happy doing that, you're happy with that, I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is where Lillian will inform us what people responded to.
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, so usually for each webinar, when people register, we ask them what they want to cover, what they want to learn. And I just wanted to kind of highlight that we asked this in 2019, and there's not been too much difference, except that this time round, there's more mention of people wanting to find out how to encourage staff to engage more with learning analytics and insights. And our speakers today are going to kind of run through their organizational approaches. So I think we're going to learn a lot more about that directly from them. Some of the other things that people wanted to learn are covered, as Alistair has already mentioned, in the case studies from 2019. So I've linked to them directly from this page. But similarly, anything on ethics and privacy, that will be really good for discussion after our speakers have finished. And we have the JISC resources already linked on the previous page as well. So yeah, we can now move on.
Yes,
Alistair?
I'm just noticing people are having problems opening that resource. So I've just popped it in again.
No, I've just put in the text chat, Alistair.
Okay.
For everyone just to watch the presentation for now. I'm trying to investigate why the link isn't working.
Okay, I think it is probably working, but it's possibly too many people at the same time. Okay, so.
Were we going to look at the Google form, Alistair? Or
Oh,
will we
sorry.
skip?
Yeah, shall we go on just now, and then I've completely forgotten to bring that up. I'll bring that up in a second.
Yeah, okay. And then we'll move on to our speakers. I'll send you the link, Alistair, to click on.
Great. Thank you very much. Got that.
Okay, so we're just going to, we asked people before they joined, well, we tweeted and asked on the mailing lists whether people had used learning analytics already. So this is just a summary of the results. We had 21 responses, and people were just kind of letting us know what kind of learning analytics they were involved with. So yeah, most people are using data from systems like the VLE or lecture capture. A very small number, but at least one person is using a learning record store, and that would be lovely to hear from you, especially in the discussion. And then others, which are probably in-house dashboards, etc. So, you know, we do have this link available, and I can kind of share the results in the chat. So if you'd like to kind of look at those results in a little bit more detail, these are people who have joined the webinar, so you can network and investigate if someone else has something there that you would like to kind of talk about. Okay. And I think without further ado, we will move on to our first speakers, who are Ragda and Sam from University of Newcastle. Don't worry about that missing slide, because they're going to screen share. And once we finish the webinar, you'll be able to see their slides in the learning object. So Ragda and Sam are learning technology advisors at the University of Newcastle, and they've been working on learning analytics work for maybe 3 years, I believe. I'm going to let them explain what they've been up to.
Yeah, thank you, Lillian. I think we've been introduced. We're both from the Learning and Teaching Development Service. Myself, Ragda, and my colleague Sam. Yeah.
Hi.
Sam, will you go introduce us to the objectives?
Yeah, sure. So today what we're going to discuss, our objectives are to explore what learning analytics means to us at Newcastle University. We're going to discuss our approach to learning analytics at the university, And we're also going to present some case studies of use at our institution as well, so you can see where it's been implemented successfully. So what does Learn Analytics mean to us? Very much like I'd imagine a lot of colleagues on the call now, we identify with SOLA's description of Learn Analytics in that it's the measurement, collection, analysis and reporting of data about learners and their contexts. So what we do, the way in which we approach this, it's through the technologies that we use that can collect this data. So just as an example, we have our VLE Canvas, we've got Recap, which is our lecture capture software, and there's various other platforms as well, such as our student record system. And when it comes to effective practice and using Learn Analytics to support the teaching and learning processes, we use this data to track students' learning processes, to inform conversations with students, and to inform planning and decision making as well. So I appreciate we don't have a lot of time here, so I'm just going to briefly go over some of the work that we've done so far and the milestones that we've achieved at the university. So in 2019, we had an approved ethics policy and framework, and that meant any intervention had to be for the benefit of the students. And it also meant that any learning analytics projects that were to take place going forward had to abide by this policy as well. In 2020, we had a task and finish group set up, and the aims of that were to explore available software solutions, to identify any appropriate data sources for the university, and support any implementation process of software as well. And as you'll see on screen, these are some of the colleagues and services that we liaise with throughout that exploration phase. So it's quite a broad range of colleagues that have been involved in the process so far. Thanks, Ragda.
Along with this, just to let you know that we do use Power BI on dashboards developed internally, where we analyze admission data, we analyze degree outcomes, responses from students on surveys, whether they are internal or external. Also, this data that's been analyzed offered to directors of programs and degrees, which they can use for their annual monitoring reviews and at boards of studies. But what we found out from talking to students and colleagues, professional and academic, that a holistic view of student interaction with various information systems across the university would be very useful to understand the process rather than the outcomes of learning and teaching. So these systems would have various interactions according to the students' disciplines and programs within programs and schools. What we concluded from the explorative work is that we modeled the student learning journey, starting from their commencement to the university, enrollment in courses, engagement with learning with these systems, sitting for assessments for learning, all of this targeted towards achievement and progression. But we also consider their well-being, just to make sure that we are offering inclusive learning. Based on this model, we've identified that student engagement, attainment and achievement and well-being all together would be very useful to understand and get a holistic view of their learning journey. Off to you, Sam.
Thanks, Ragda. So I'd just like to go through some of the way colleagues have been using Canvas New Analytics to support their teaching and learning processes at the university. So just for context, if you don't use Canvas as your VLE, what Canvas can surface is course average grades, course interactions and individual student interactions, such as their page views and how they participate in a course, as well as attendance analytics as well, which can be set at an institutional level, but could include things such as page views, assignment submissions and discussion posts as well. And there's also a range of useful reports you can pull out of Canvas New Analytics. Thanks, right there. So just as an example of where New Analytics has been used is in a place called Into, who run programs for international students who want support for academic English. Here we had Rochelle Madison, who used to identify how international students were engaging with the course content. And what she found was that there was some students unable to access some key videos because of their location in the world. She also noticed that some students didn't access pre-learning materials. This meant that she could amend that teaching plan to account for this as well. And she also noticed that some of the students weren't accessing key pieces of information, such as the assessment overview page, which had assignments and the deadlines for assignments as well. So overall, she felt that it was a really useful tool in revealing issues that may not have ordinarily been identified. Oh, I think you're on mute, Rag, there.
Just realized. I thought that it would be very useful to mention Ally on Canvas. Ally offers 4 ways of managing content and promoting its accessibility through scanning the content and providing accessibility scores. This can be at course level, account, and institutional levels. These scores, the accessibility scores, would give indicator on which items and which content can be improved. It can take the user and the author through a walkthrough to improve the content. The students can view and download content in alternative format. And we found out that during the lockdown, for example, students favored downloading MP3s. Also, it provides institutional report, usage report that tells the institution administrators how much content was downloaded, overall accessibility score across the whole university, and enhanced content and student uptake of specific formats. This was very useful for us. We noticed the improvement of accessibility scores across courses and across the whole institution since the moment we have installed Canvas and staff started using it. Another example of the use of analytics at the university is using recap analytics. Our colleague Dr. David Grundy used the recap analytics to understand students' interaction with videos on his course, which gave an idea that the students stopped watching videos at a certain point. This helped him revise the content and cut it into small bites and offer it to student where he found out that the interaction improved and the view duration improved, where student can get the whole content in a video. It was very important for his course and for the students. Now, also from our experience with analytics, we realized that our colleagues had concerns about privacy and data quality, and how this would have any implications on students' well-being. The institution's responsibility and obligation to act and students' right to access their data and colleagues to be equipped with the tools made us go ahead and explore more about the use and make sure that the use of analytics would support students' learning experience. We look at it from a perspective that it is an opportunity to reinforce trust between the students and the university. So we have developed an ethical policy that's not only a policy, but it's a framework where it explains our motivations, the purpose, what kind of data we are targeting, and it's all towards the benefit of the student. We also base all our work on the legitimate interest for lawful processing and compelling benefit under the GDPR. We use JISC Code of Practice for Learning Analytics as basis for our policy and framework for our work and piloting all these scatter tools, analytic tools across the university. That's it for us. On our slides, you will find some useful links, which will help you understand how our approach towards analytics. And we're happy to answer any questions in the chat.
That is excellent timing. Thank you very much. I was so busy writing something in the text chat that I was a little bit late with the halfway bell, so I'm sorry about that, but you were perfect. So if people have questions, and I can see there's already some questions coming in, keep those coming into the chat pane. What we're going to do now, it's a great pleasure to have Helen Gould from the University of Strathclyde joining us now and following up on Ragnar and Sam's session. Helen is Deputy Associate Principal for Learning and Teaching at the University of Strathclyde and has been involved in institutional level learning analytics in quite a deep way, both in Strathclyde and a little bit more widely with the QAA collaborative structure, collaborative cluster. So I just need to ask whoever's screen sharing now to stop for the moment so that I can share. It's still telling me that somebody's screen sharing.
Alistair, Helen is screen sharing already.
Oh, Helen's screen sharing already. That's even better. So, sorry, I hadn't spotted it was Helen doing that. Fantastic. So, Helen, it's over to you. I wasn't sure if I was doing your slides or you were, but I'm really pleased you are. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Alistair, and welcome to everyone. I've been asked today to provide you with a brief account of the learning analytics journey we've taken at Strathclyde so far. I should start by saying that this is a work in progress, and I think that's common for all institutions, but it's been an area of development for a number of years here at Strathclyde. So in doing so, I'm representing the work of a number of people across the university, both centrally and within our faculties. And in particular, my colleague Brian Green has been integral to our successes. My own involvement has been at a strategic level within the institution, rather than a hands-on technical development. And it's from that perspective. And I'm going to touch on a few things that have come up in the chat already as well. So for initial context, our overarching approach to learning analytics at Strathclyde it's centred around improving the student experience and ensuring students are supported, engaged and on track. And in common with Newcastle, we use ClickView and we're exploring Power BI. We do an awful lot of analytics at Strathclyde. We separately from learning analytics specifically. So culturally at Strathclyde, we have and do make significant use of data internally. And we strive, I suppose, to make good informed decisions, and that is included within the learning and teaching area and providing data sets in particular to discipline areas. So as a result of this, the learning analytics work aligns to our natural approach, and that's very much encouraged our interest in the area. So what I wanted to describe is the journey at Strathclyde, and it began fairly early in sector terms as we started to explore learning analytics at an institutional level around 2014. We did this initially by having JISC undertake their learning analytics readiness assessment for us. This was a service JISC provided at the time to support universities in really understanding what they need to consider in order to actively engage with learning analytics by taking stock of where they were at that particular time. This provided us with a lot of detailed information, and it was a really good foundation for planning. We were in quite a good position in terms of data and culturally, but we were certainly lacking in policy and the strategy aspect to move forward. And it was around this time that we also engaged with the European Sheila project, which I would recommend you explore through their website. Lots of resources compiled there. And this provided very useful insight for us at the time on learning analytics generally by engaging with the other institutions across Europe who were interested. But it also provided us with a policy development framework, which we subsequently used. This was their Rapid Outcome Mapping Approach, or ROMA, and there's lots of information on their site about this. But they specifically designed ROMA for policy making derived from scientific evidence. And there's a lot of focus on stakeholders and a cyclic development. So we applied that at Strathclyde, and it significantly influenced our own institutional developments of learning analytics and the direction that we went in. So basically, it was those two activities that helped us form our foundation, if you like, for the institutional approach. We had created a learning analytics board by this time, and we also undertook a number of pilot projects. What we were looking to do was to really explore what was possible given the digital ecosystem that we had at the time, and also the available data that we had at the time. So we also looked at more strategic issues and policy requirements through the board, and including defining what our perspective and objectives would be. So the pilots were undertaken across different areas in the institution, and they mainly focused on our online portfolio. And that helped us explore the different issues involved, from the obvious technical aspects to the potential learning and teaching value, the resource requirements, and actually, most importantly, it raised up lots of the ethical considerations. And we had student voice on the Learning Analytics Board, and that was really a really interesting ongoing conversation around the ethical implications. Also at the time, because Strathclyde has an assessment feedback as a particular focus for development generally, and many of you in the UK would certainly recognise this from a national student survey perspective, we instigated an institutional project to develop support for the students in managing their own assessments, and that the work associated with those, the creation of an assessment dashboard within our VLE, and we use Moodle. And so this was therefore linking our broader learning and teaching strategy through to the learning analytics development. So within our pilot work, we explored the value of a staff designed engagement report. That was one of the things that came out of those initial pilots. And in particular, capturing indicators of student engagement on a weekly basis that you've already heard about. So then we built on this institutionally and developed a staff designed engagement function within Moodle, where individual lecturers or the academics and teaching staff are able to define what's important to them. And it allows that within the learning journey, you get an automated report on student engagement linked through to a dashboard. And that's now available to all modules at Strathclyde. As a result of the overall interest, in parallel to these developments, we decided to devote a stream of our QAA Scotland enhancement theme activity in exploring the student perspective in depth. So that's a 3-year enhancement theme. And it was exploring that and using it as a focus to really try and engage with our student community to look at the ethical considerations and have a discussion around that. So in order to do that, we employed student interns each year of the 3-year theme. And we were looking to explore student attitude to learning analytics. So the first year of this research, which was hugely valuable, actually turned out to be, frankly, slightly depressing. We'd been keen to engage in this discussion. However, our interns' work around this in focus groups and surveys made it clear that our student community had really little understanding of their digital footprints and were therefore unable to engage in a meaningful discussion on learning analytics as they didn't understand enough about it. So it uncovered some serious misunderstandings of digital data, and particularly in terms of their rights over GDPR and what GDPR meant for them. So as a result of that, we actually went on to develop a digital footprint, Watch Your Step, online self-directed course, which was really meant to address that development need. So looking at raising our student awareness of digital personal agency and GDPR. So this was part of our overall learning analytics, but we found we were quite constrained in terms of the technical limitations on how our data was collected and stored and accessed. So it was clear we needed to do something about that. So we launched a project to create a student data mart that would bring it all together and then support the further work. So we instigated this, and then it kicked off. We had some recruitment challenges just at the start, but then COVID-19 struck. So it's been somewhat delayed, but is ongoing now. But that's really going to be something for us to be building on into the future. So COVID-19 has brought with it lots of new opportunities, though, for learning analytics at Strathclyde, because we've found that our digital ecosystem has been massively impacted, rapidly introducing new systems such as Zoom, new data flows, lots of things to take on board, and also changed the applicability of it, because now it's much more relevant across the whole campus, because every single programme has online element to it, so a much better, richer data set associated with it. So we're quite excited as to where it will go next. And I just wanted finally to flag up some other work that was undertaken over the last few years, and that's a learning analytics collaborative cluster. So within the Evidence for Enhancement Scottish sector, had a collaborative cluster, which is basically an opportunity for Scottish universities to engage with an area collaboratively over a 3-year of a theme. So we had 14 institutions involved with 14 different student interns based across it. And what we created out of that was a wiki, which you can see the details of at the bottom of the slide. And that basically captures the work across the 3 different areas, but it gives you an insight into the work that's been undertaken at each of these institutions in learning analytics. It's a little bit out of date because of COVID, but we're hopefully going to re-engage with that and get everyone to update it. But I think that's probably a worthwhile resource to check out as well, give an idea of the other institutional journeys. Okay, so I think that's my full amount of time. So I will hand back over to Alistair.
Again, fantastic, Helen. Thank you very much, and superbly on time. I'm not having my best day. I rang the bell while I was muted the first time, which didn't help. So thank you very much. And now we have our very own, we can say that, Teresa McKinnon, who's going to be talking about another area of learning analytics, which kind of builds in with motivation, student motivation, and is possibly something where people haven't necessarily thought about joining the two together. And we're very happy to pass you over to Teresa now. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Alistair. Wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, I'm following the sort of trajectory of the presentations so far, and I think this might be the one that you would consider perhaps out of the box, a little bit unusual, but I'm approaching this idea, and I think it's Lillian I have to thank for making this connection, because I hadn't particularly connected Open Badges with learning analytics. But this is really a way of looking at the whole thing quite differently, looking at the business of understanding learning and what's happening quite differently. And I'm drawing here on the experiences that I've had over the past 6 years with using Open Badges, particularly connected with virtual exchange, which is an area that I'm very active in. It's an area where our mission, if you like, is to connect students and staff who are based at different institutions, and to get them working collaboratively on either short-term or longer-term projects together. So it's a very particular use, if you like, of student learning. But during that 6-year period, we've learned an awful lot about how Open Badges can actually help develop understanding of learning, both for staff and students alike. So I won't have time to go into the details of what an Open Badge is particularly in this session. So you'll find that the slides that I've shared have got within the notes, and they're shared online as well and on my SlideShare feed, lots and lots of additional links to follow up, because some may never have heard of an Open Badge and others are perhaps very familiar with them already. Essentially, really, you've got an artifact, a digital artifact, which carries information. And that information can be about how that artifact was earned. And essentially, the artifact is recognizing effort and experiences that an individual has had. And the beauty of an Open Badge is that it is portable recognition of their effort and experiences. It belongs actually to the earner, and then it's up to them as to how they use it. So essentially what you're able to do with the infrastructure of Open Badges is to create badges which are at micro credential level, can be very, very small recognition of very, very small activities. And you can also curate the badges that you've been earned. As you can see on this slide, you have an infrastructure that is interoperable. It's built on interoperability. There are many different platforms you can use. The platform that we have used particularly for virtual exchange has been the Finnish company Open Badge Factory. But the fact that all of the credentials here, or micro credentials here, that we can create have been interoperable, means that once they're earned, they can be taken and displayed in lots of different platforms in lots of different ways. So they're not locked into any particular technology. Currently, Open Badges runs as version 2, is just about to move to version 3, but everything can be migrated and moved across So there are multiple platforms to choose from. And you'll see amongst the links a link to something called Badge Wiki. And if this is your first meeting of Open Badges, I really recommend you follow that Badge Wiki link and take a look, because the whole Badges community has shared lots and lots of helpful resources, both a sort of primer on badges, but also research and publications based around them. So once you've got a platform, you can import badges from it, you can export to other systems if you wish to. And those of you who've been using badges for a while have probably already done that, because Mozilla handed this infrastructure over to IMS Global to look after. And many of you therefore probably will have migrated from your backpacks and into another way of displaying your recognition. For example, Open Badge Passport, as you can see, is named here. And really in Virtual Exchange, what we're looking to do is to make sure that you understand how you can show off your digital identity. The badges went well, the bell went well there, no problem. So should you wish to do so, if you've never had a badge before, you can scan that QR code and pick up your socially distanced badge. So why is it a weird and wonderful world? Well, because badges can recognize something very serious, something that is perhaps hard academic work, but it can also recognize something that a community values. So keeping socially distanced would be a good example of that. My experience, as I mentioned, has come through an EU project, a large-scale implementation. So you can see this was a European-backed virtual exchange initiative working with the MENA countries, so Middle East and North Africa, using badges to recognize participation. But ownership, once those badges are shared, really extends opportunities. So it's not just about ticking a box to say you have done this. It actually gives you, it catalyzes further potential activities that you can pick up on and build on. So the Irish All Aboard digital initiative, for example, also uses Open Badges. So having found out what you know and what you don't know about your digital identity, that once you've got that curated on, for example, an Open Badge Passport, you can see other opportunities to follow up. So why is this important? Well, I think Faisal and Selwyn really sort of explain this very nicely. We need to think not just about learning within institutional context. We need to connect with the thoughts around lifelong and life-wide learning. And Open Badges really provide a great opportunity to embed tech in meaningful experiences, to support connections that are not just constrained to an institution. Designing and creating an ecosystem of Open Badges, as we did for Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange, catalyzes discussions between stakeholders. So one of the most useful things that we learn by implementing Open Badges is that we can work with students to design them. What do they value? We can work with colleagues in different countries to find out how they would approach different learning opportunities. So you can start then to see how those learning opportunities are being used in a wider way. So here are some statistics and really some reporting opportunities that I've drawn here from Uni Collaboration, which is the virtual exchange in higher education organization. And you can see here that when we've analysed some of the use and the display of Open Badges, we can start to see where sharing happens, how students are using those, which sort of badges have been particularly of interest, whether our professional development participation has led to other opportunities. And you can start to encourage people to network and come together and work on additional and further lifelong, life-wide opportunities for learning. So it's very important to those who actually inspired the use of Open Badges in the first place the community of users and developers, that they protect this open nature and this open intent behind open badges, that this doesn't become something that's locked down through blockchain, for example, or stuck within an institution, but actually it leads to opportunities of recognition, opportunities of understanding of what's happening. And clearly the pandemic has given us lots of opportunities to better understand the nature of virtual interaction. So I would really recommend taking a look at the Open Recognition Alliance, which is really all about recognizing learning in whatever its form, whether formal or informal. And of course, I join you today as a retired associate professor. So I'm coming from outside the walls, if you like, of academia these days. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge not just what happens within formal courses, but that we give people paths to find other ways of learning. And I'm very quickly going to my last slide, and some links here to find out more, including, if I point you to that very last link there, you can download a very easy, quick to read, short document that will give you more information about open badges and how they can be used and how they can be of use to you.
Thank you very much. And again, fitted in 10. I think this is probably one of the first times that we've had everybody fit in bang on their 10 minutes. So excellent, very professionally done, everybody. So loads of things going on in the text chat now. I'm going to hand over to Ron for the next bit.
Thanks, Alistair. Well, actually, it's all of us, isn't it? It's we would ask our guest speakers to turn their cameras back on again and their mics. And this is a kind of time we allow for more in-depth discussion from the questions that have been posed in the text chat, or any new questions that might come up, and responding verbally rather than just via the text chat. So is there anything key that's cropped up there that would benefit further explanation from one of our guest speakers?
I think there's been a little bit of discussion going on about what the extent to which your existing legacy VLE, your structures, your reporting, etc., constrains and shapes learning analytics. And obviously the idea would be to work the other way around, to start off with a learning analytics design and desire, and then get the systems to fit it. But you've already got existing systems. So I'm interested in how that panned out, particularly in Strathclyde, but also anybody else in the within the participants. Any issues with that?
I'm quite happy to kick us off with a comment on Strathclyde. I mean, it's certainly something that we wrestled with, because the majority of the accessible data we had was from Moodle, but there was lots of other data all over the place that from a learning analytics perspective, we would want to connect together. So that's why we kicked off the Student Data Mart, because we thought we can't go far enough forward without the tail wagging the dog based on. But I think that process is slightly iterative as well, because we're exploring what we might do. And I think you need to kind of understand what's there to get that creativity come through and ideas. Yeah. So it's iterative, but you do need to address the infrastructure, certainly from our perspective.
Great. Any other comments on that, or any other in the text chat? Any other points that people have made? I'm just trying to catch up the text chat.
I think, I've copied a lot of the questions into our lesson plan, Alistair and Ron, if you want to look along each speaker's role. But I think one interesting question that popped up when Ragda and Sam were on, have you done any analysis to see if there's any correlation between LI scores and student interaction on a course? So, I mean, I don't know if that's something you've considered doing.
This is done at the Canvas admin level, but it's not shared, to be honest with us. We know that Ally is being used, the scores are improving. Just at a nutshell, we haven't gone through the analysis like in quantitative and numeric view the way is expected. I think the analysis here means that we look at it from a quantitative analysis perspective, which we I know that there is a view and follow up on ally use from the admin perspective, but it's not something that we have viewed ourselves. We've just been briefed about it.
So another Canvas related question, or generally in terms of how you work with academics, was the impetus on teachers to inspect and act on the data, or was it aggregated in some way and shared with every academic centrally?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll take that. I think I tried to respond to Peter about for this question. So we haven't mandated that all academics use learning analytics. On the contrary, in our framework, our policies, we said that it is left to their discretion, so it's up to them to use it or not. And intervention, what comes after looking at the data, is still something that we are discussing with academics. There hasn't been anything that is prescribed to them or subscribed. We are working with them and defining the outliers at extreme levels where we don't have any engagement for students. What do we do? And if we have like low achievement, what do we do? But there wasn't like a prescription to academics to follow a certain intervention approach when they look at data. And the part of the question asked whether the data is collective or individual, my understanding. So I attempted to answer that what we have on Canvas for the moment shows both individual and course analytics. And also it shows within one course, but there is a view, very limited view, that shows analytics across multiple courses at account level.
One of the things I find very interesting about analytics is the extent to which students in a situation like yours, where some courses they're using learning analytics, some courses that they may not be using analytics. If a student had a positive choice where they might be struggling because of a disability or any other reason, and they might think, I'd love to do a course where somebody was picking me up if my organisation was getting behind and I was dropping. Or on the other hand, a completely different kind of student that just doesn't want to be tracked. There are preferences that would perhaps attract a student to a course or away from a course if they knew about it. What are the ethics behind a student having some kind of communication when they start a course as to whether or not learning analytics are being used on that course?
This is one of the reasons we still didn't. Canvas enables students to view analytics, by the way, but we haven't enabled it to students because we still did not define the approach of the interventions to learning analytics. What we aim to have is like a proper dashboard or a system for both views from a student and academic perspectives, where it's a central point where a student can make a choice whether to view it and to enable certain features and customize it or not. Okay. So a link between student preference to courses, whether they use it, I think relies a lot on the communication. If we communicate to students that it is available, then we should be having like an approach internally how to respond to students. Consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then there's questions that popped up when Helen was speaking as well, and I'm not sure how much of that's been answered already in the conversations because the chat was flowing, and it's lovely to see the engagement with this topic. But I think again it was I think we may have touched on this already, Alistair, in terms of like how legacy systems can dictate approaches, whereas obviously the staff approach. And although we talk about the staff approach, I wasn't sure whether students got involved in those projects, Helen?
So in terms of the development, we had students involved in the projects to give us that student voice through the development side of it. And in particular, students were involved in the design of the assessment and feedback it's more assessment focused, but it is trying to pull together in Moodle the assessment and feedback across multiple different classes, because Moodle is very individual module based. So we had them working with that. When we got onto the staff dashboard, from an ethical point of view, we wanted to put a member of staff between the analytics data and the students, and support them in looking at that engagement. So the staff member decides, and they can use it for different things. So they might choose to do it from a course design perspective. So looking to see what they expected engagement to be high on. You know, if everybody does really well in the assessments, but didn't touch the key resource that they thought was going to be key to it, then it tells you, you've got to question that side of it. So we didn't use students in that aspect as much, because it's more about exploring that sort of level of engagement and normal support.
Yeah, I think we've started to discuss in the chat about ways of capturing student engagement that isn't so obvious through analytics, and that's probably a discussion for another day, isn't it? It's about student engagement as a big picture thing, and all the different things that can feed into an academic's understanding of that, or teacher's understanding of that. And then just one question for Teresa from the chat. Just about someone was generally asking if anyone's using Badger Pro with Canvas, if there's anybody that can add to that in the chat. And I shared a link with in the chat that demonstrates how open badges link in with the frameworks for learning analytics, which hopefully made it a little bit clearer for everyone. I'll just add it in the chat again for Teresa. So yeah, sometimes people are using the data they get from the badges as kind of a proxy for full learning analytics, but that's quite an interesting idea. But yeah, I thought we had quite a lot of good chat as well. And Alistair got a bell badge while you were speaking, Teresa, for ringing the bell at the right time.
Finally, third time lucky.
And I think Tracy and Scott and Steve, even Mike, you've been very active in the chat. Feel free to turn on your mics and ask any questions to the speakers as well, if anything's not been answered.
And indeed anyone else. Yeah.
And indeed anyone else.
Can we quickly go through the last pages while you're doing that, though? People can carry on adding to the text chat, because otherwise we're going to run out of time.
It was just this issue about, it's Mike here, just this issue about the fact that most people claim that you can't show Blackboard Ally ratings, and it's interesting, Steve says it's an option. Somebody's told me it's not an option, so I'll be interested to know. And if it is an option, why has everybody got it off and they've decided they're not going to show the students the accessibility? I mean, surely it's related to the accessibility statement. If you've got data, I know it's not completely accurate because it's automated, but if you've got data on the accessibility of documents in courses, shouldn't the students be shown this?
I think I personally feel it would drive people to to correct documents in a meaningless way if they felt they were being judged based on the accessibility score. So, I mean, at the University of York, the score is not the be all and end all, and we don't beat people about the heads with the score. Rather they understood how to make documents accessible. And so the accessibility score is just one measure.
I think that would be fine if you said we're going to use the score internally, and we're going to put an accessibility statement about what is and isn't accessible for each course.
Yeah.
But people aren't doing that.
I'm just going to ring the bell at the minute so that not to stop the discussion, but we can carry the discussion on after the magic hour, just to give Ron a chance to go through the last couple of bits, and then we can come back to the discussion, and people are very welcome to stay on with us.
Thanks, Alistair. You're still seeing my screen, yeah?
We are, yep.
Speaker, yeah. So I'll whiz through this very quickly. There's an About Us page where there's contact details and so on that we've normally got in there. A reminder to join our mailing list if you're not already a member. That's where we'll publicise when the recording for this session is available. And also a reminder that if as we said earlier, we're going to continue this series under the badge of Reflected. And so if anyone's keen to be a guest speaker on the online Learning What Works session, which is at 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 24th of February, we'd be very keen to hear from you. We will ask you to respond to the What One Thing, and we'll put a link in the text chat to that. There's usually a page in here that kind of reminds you that we use Xerte for this, and just to demonstrate some of the kind of dashboard type functionality you can get out of the box with Xerte, and this is available to any tutor that's using Xerte from an institutional install that's linked up. First of all, there's a static results page where the user, the student, can download their results from all of the resources. There's a stock tracking page here, which I'm not viewing this via the XAPI, but thank you to everyone that did use the XAPI launcher that we posed a link to. That's just to simulate a way that would happen transparently in a VLE, that you would, as a learner, follow the link and it would be tracking your name and your details. So just very quickly, this is the dashboard that was created from those views earlier, and there's some kind of issue that was happening because of the number of people accessing at the same time. But you can see this is the typical dashboard. There's lots of pages in the resource that we've shared with you, so it's a big long list. But what you can, as an individual tutor, analyze is the amount of time that any individual student spent on each page and some of the responses they gave. So for instance, there's a video there that's been watched for an average duration and so on. And if I view my kind of example attempt here, you can see that I've gone through how long I spent, the individual pages that I kind of completed, activity pages that I completed, and also the text information screen, the text box where I was asked to post a responsive question, a reflective question, that will be detailed in there. And then as a whole group, as a whole class, you can view the overview. I'm not sure why that's not showing. It will show you this long list in a printable version as well. So just very quickly to go back, what we ask you to do before you leave, and one of the reasons we do this as well via the text wall is that you'll be able to see these results. You'll be able to see these responses, what one thing each of you have said that you're going to do after we've finished the webinar. If we use the text chat or if we use any other method, you typically won't be able to see them. So in a way, that's a kind of source of analytics as well, that you can view the responses by others and perhaps gain ideas as to what other people have said. So the activity is, what one thing will you do as a result of what we've discussed, and try to be as specific and action-based as that, rather than, you know, recap on the resources. Try to pick out something specifically that you will follow up on or look into in more detail based on what you've heard from our guest speakers or from the resource and the previous guest speakers. Anything to add to that, Alistair, Lillian?
No, that sounds very good.
I should say Rosemary and Teresa as well. Have you got anything to add?
Gosh, it's been such a rich experience, as these sessions always are. So there's lots to pick up. Sorry, lots to come back to. I've got a sleeping cat behind my computer, so I'm sure you're picking up some extraneous noise as well.
I'm busy typing away. There's some really good discussions going on in the chat.
While it's kind of silent, I'll add just a little bit more to the way that the Xerte dashboard that I just showed works. Is that if you've got the everything fully integrated, then what you can do is share that dashboard in a VLE with your learners, and what they will see is just their results. So they'd be able to analyze for themselves the the pages in the various resources that they've spent more or less time on, and the results of those individual interactions. So much more richer and powerful than the likes of SCORM, for those of you who use SCORM, has provided in the past. And really the real power is then extending that into what we refer to as adaptive learning, in as far as the resources themselves can adapt to those previous attempts and previous results and deliver completely different journeys through the content, if that's all configured correctly.
So I'm tempted to say we're at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to stop the recording here.